I've got an upcoming project where I need to cut some large rectangular panels out of sheet stock. A track saw would be great, but I don't have one, not yet. So I'm going to make some circular saw cutting guides out of this MDF. Let's see, 5 inches would work. And that would clear the clamps. And I'm going to use this other panel with a factory edge as a guide to cut the guide rail off the MDF. 5 inches. That should do it. I've got scraps of 2x4 underneath the part I'm going to cut off to support it so it doesn't tear when I get to the end. The plywood panel is 8 feet. The MDF panel is 8 feet 1 inch. That's actually lucky because that gives me a little bit of extra that'll overhang an 8-foot piece for clamping and making sure I can line up on the guide before cutting. Set the depth. And I tried to do it anyway. All right, let's brace that up. See if we can finish that now. Got an oopsie right here. The saw blade started going underneath the plywood that I was using for a guide and started cutting into this part. That's not so big a deal because I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch off of this once the jig is assembled anyway. And here's, you can't even see that real well. There's another oopsie right here, which means this side's not going to work well for a straight guide. The end's going to be a little wonky. I can either cut that off if I use this for the shorter guides, or I can run it through the table saw and clean up that edge. Let me think on that. So we're going to do another one from the side. Okay, so I'm going 5 inches. Now I have to be careful that the plate on the saw doesn't go underneath this one again. And make sure I've got support. Underneath all the way down, especially at the end. Okay, so a few lessons learned from cutting the first piece, the first guide rail. When I go to cut the second guide rail for the second guide, I need to make sure I'm pushing down on this plywood so that the plate of the circular saw doesn't go underneath it. I've adjusted the scrap 2x4s underneath for support, so hopefully it doesn't bind up when I get to the last part of the cut here. Wish me luck. Oh. Okay, that one came out beautiful. Yep. Okay, so this will be for my 8-foot one. This one where I've got the little flaw right here, I can make a 4-foot and a 3-foot plus a few inches. Just cut that off and we'll be good to go. So this is the one that's got the funky bit of cut to it. And the other funky bit's right here, so. And I'll chop off the bad bit here, and then I'll take a 4-foot and a 3-foot, somewhere in there, I'll figure that out when I get to it. So that I've got shorter ones for cross-cutting panels. And this one, all the edges are beautiful. This one will be the long one for cutting full-length sheet goods. So one side is going to be for the battery powered saw. Yep. 4.5, and I'll be trimming some off of that. Yep, 4.5 will do it. Okay, that's marked so I can glue it and put it back in the same spot. I'm going to use 3/4 inch staples to lock them together. And before I forget, let me label this. This side's for the 5 1/2 battery. This side's for the 7 1/4 corded. And now I'm going to do the same on the other side. I went with 4 1/2 inches. Pencil mark so I know where to glue. And staples. And I got to remember to label this. Okay, so while it's one big, sturdy, and stable piece, I can trim the edges. The outside edges are for the cordless battery-powered saw. The next bit's a teeny bit trixies. Using the 7 1/4 corded to cut the other side of the guide is also going to cut it free, and I've got to make sure it's well supported. Right there, I think. Let's see. Okay, so the saw's going to cut about here. So I need up to my fingertips to support the other side. And then scraps. And these need to go kind of angled to give it some bracing so that it doesn't torque shear bend and that. And then a couple more scraps at this end, so as it starts to come down and come free, it doesn't collapse. Okay, how's the depth? Okay, I like that. And I just got to hold it tight to this side. Beautiful. Now adjust. These braces. For the other side. And supporting the edge is going to come off. So that it doesn't bind up and rip apart. I need one long one for ripping sheet goods to width. I need a shorter one for cross-cutting sheet goods to width. And I think I want to go, let's see. Okay, at 4'2", I missed these staples, and that gives me a 1-inch overlap at each end to make sure that my saw is well aligned before it starts cutting into the panel. So 4'2", and then I'm going to cut that end off there. Oh, let's use that. That's why I made it. 4'2". Put it over here. clear the cut line, and I need a cut depth. This should go through everything. Now label this one 8 feet 1 inches. Rip. And label this one 4 feet 2 inches crosscut. And this one, the guide rail's got a bad spot here where I wandered a little bit. If I take it at 3'8", that takes the bad spot out. So I've got 4 foot, and I can always cut this one down shorter if I need a shorter one. Okay, so let's go with 3'8". And I can use my cutting jig here that we just made to do this other cut. Some staples to reinforce the ends that I just cut. And don't forget to label this one. 5.5 battery. This is the 7 1/4 corded. And I'm not putting a length on this one because I know it's shorter. And it's sacrificial. It's going to have the option to be cut down shorter and shorter as I need. Mrs. Steve has asked for an information board. And that's going to begin with cutting out a big rectangular panel from the sheet of 3/8 plywood. I used 1/2 inch MDF for these saw guides. I had thought about going thinner, but then they would be flimsy even though they would give me more depth of cut from the circular saw. Thicker would be stiffer, but I'd lose a lot of cut. 1/2 inch was a nice compromise. And these are quite stiff enough to do what I need to do. And I made 8 foot, 4 foot, and a shorter that'll be sacrificed shorter and shorter as I need smaller crosscuts. I had fun making these circular saw guides. I'm Steve from the YouTube channel Workbench-Z. Go have fun with your tools. I had fun making these. Paint sensor. Polymerizing